Hello and welcome to the Road Monkey podcast, the show that shares insightful stories to motivate, inspire and support you, following your dreams on your own journeys through both work and life. For our UK listeners, the clocks have changed this weekend, the weather's turned in the last week and we are heading towards the summer. And on that theme of positivity, this week we are joined by two guests on the show, and they are two of the most inspiring women I have ever met. Dannie and Helen joined me today from SeaChange Retreats, which provide surf and wellbeing escapes for adults affected by cancer. This could be the patients themselves or their family and support network. Now, this episode has been a long time in the making. I heard about the project over a year ago and was immediately captivated. I've since attended a number of their events as a member of the in-water support team and can proudly say these have been some of the most moving and inspirational days I've ever been involved in. Our conversation today explores the journey from concept through fundraising all the way through to delivery. They are always looking for support, and I cannot bang the drum enough of how amazing this project is. And with so many of us sadly likely to be impacted by cancer at some point in our lives, this is truly something to follow up on today and look into. Our conversation does get pretty emotional with some tears and even at the end the guest appearance of the SeaChange dog. So for those of you watching the interview on YouTube, look forward to that. We did have a few audio challenges in our recording in the first 10 minutes or so, but hopefully with some clever editing we've managed to style it out. But stick with this conversation all the way to the end, and please make sure you check out SeaChange's website afterwards, the link to which we've put in the show notes. Right, let's get into our conversation and episode 68 of the Road Monkey podcast. SeaChange Retreats, helping those affected by cancer one wave at a time. Hello and welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having us. I'm very excited.
Well, it's almost taken, it feels like nearly a year to pin this down, but actually a lot's happened in between. But we'll come on to that a bit later. If you can just give our listeners and our viewers out there just a quick introduction from both of you as to who you are and what you guys do.
So we are Dannie and Helen, and we run SeaChange Retreats, which is a CIC, which is Community Interest Company. And I'm Helen, clinical psychologist. I work in the NHS. I also do some private work. And then I'm also a surf instructor and lifeguard. So this is kind of the culmination of lots and lots of joyous things in one for me. So it makes work a little better. And Dannie and I met through the Wave Project, where we were both volunteering. We both met the Wave Project, so we have firsthand seen the effects of surf therapy on, in this case, kids, but we wanted to bring that to another community. Yeah. If you don't know about the Wave Project, listen to Kevin's podcast with him, because they're an amazing charity.
What Joe's done, and I'll obviously link that episode in the show notes, but it's really good to hear these linked stories of how people have been inspired by one thing and it's led to something else. So going from that first moment where you met at the Wave Project, saw the impact of therapy on human beings, what was the next step to get to where it was now?
So it kind of rewinds before that, actually. So I was working in London as a psychologist in a CAMHS child mental health service, and I took a sabbatical and basically just went surfing for a while to recalibrate for myself and get a little bit more life balance. While I was away, I was encouraged to think about surfing, I spent all my time surfing, but I was thinking about becoming a surf instructor. Came back to the UK, trained as a surf instructor and a beach lifeguard, and on the course that I did down in Newquay were some guys who were working with the Wave Project, and they were also doing their surf instructor and beach lifeguard qualifications, and they said, why don't you come and do your instructor hours with us with the Wave Project? And I was just like, oh, what is this? It sounds like this combines therapy and psychology, which for me are a massive passion, but I'd sort of fallen out of love with, just because of the stress of working in London, I think, with being in the water and surfing and all of the power that brings, and the kind of sensory immersion. I just thought, oh, this sounds really good. So then I joined them, and then Dannie and I met through that. The other thing that happened when I was in Portugal was I met a friend who had cancer when he was a teenager, and we spent quite a lot of time just chatting about the impact of having cancer when you're a teenager. You get immersed into this cancer world, and then once you've finished your treatment, you kind of get spat out and you have to catch up with life, and everyone thinks you're fine and you're normal because physically you're fine and you're cancer free, but it's this huge psychological adjustment. And he and I spent ages mulling on it, and it kind of sparked lots of ideas about how do you offer something to people in those times of transition where they're supposed to physically be fine, and that therefore people expect them to be psychologically fine and mentally fine, but actually there's so much to catch up on. So all those kind of ideas went into a bit of a blender, and then you had an idea.
It sort of came from, so by my day job, I suppose, is working in web design, but I was sort of at the point where I'd had enough of that and I wanted to do something that was a bit more meaningful and contributed to society. And basically Helen told me her idea over a bottle of wine, and I said, that sounds amazing, let's do it. And from there we started.
Really?
We didn't even really know each other that well at the time.
No, and then we got very excited and dreamt massively big, thinking about everything that we'd like to include. And I think
hot tubs, stargazing, houses overlooking the beach for a week.
Yeah, like a kind of big commune living for a week where you do all this really cool nurturing stuff, and we're thinking about how you nurture different parts of your soul, and thinking about physical nurturing, thinking about connection with other people, thinking about kind of emotional well-being and mental health, thinking about exercise. And yeah, it all kind of started to come together, and then we went from there to thinking about what's the research, what's out there clinically, what's being done, what's needed, what are the unmet needs that there aren't interventions for, that looking particularly at that gap. And I suppose when we started, we were thinking mostly about people who are recovering after having had treatment, because that was probably the bit that had sparked in my conversations with my friend, but then it's also grown since then. But that was where long story, that's how it started.
I think that's it's fascinating, and you talk about that community element and what comes next, because back in I think it was season 4, I've lost all track of time now, we had a 25-year-old on who got quite late diagnosis of testicular cancer and was basically very late stage during COVID in a room on his own, and got told, if this doesn't work, you're done. And he went, I laid in that room and thought, I'm going to be the kid that dies from cancer. And there was 2 of us interviewing him, and we were like, and then he goes on to talk about how he made the full recovery, and he's immersed in this Facebook group called the Cancer Lads. And they anyone who's come through that testicular cancer experience effectively joins this community, and actually that's what keeps them going. And I thought, that's fascinating. And then obviously heard about what you guys are doing and was like, wow, like really started to unpick the layers. So let's go from bottle of wine, which I think should have been the logo at the start.
Well, to be fair, Kev, we've linked with SeaChange Wines, who crowdfunding, because we were just like, this is amazing. So we came up with SeaChange as a name, and then realized that there's SeaChange Wine, and we were like, well, that's perfect. People were like, are you going to change it? I'm like, no, that's they support the ocean through their wine, and we like wine, and
we like the ocean,
and we like the ocean.
So how did it go from an idea over a bottle of wine to day one, first people walk through the door and experience that therapy for the first time? Talk us through going through that process of a very incredible idea, but very much an idea, to where it actually got to.
I think it was almost a year from that date to when we ran our first pilot retreat, and we had a lot of meetings. There's actually a lot of great resources in Cornwall for people starting businesses. So we met with the Growth Hub and sort of showed them our idea, and it was them that sort of said, that sounds amazing, have you thought about running a day retreat? And me and Helen were like, no. That sounds rubbish. But then we ran a day and a weekend, and we thought we'd been hit by a bus, so it was very good, really helpful information really at the time. And there's a company called Access for Finance who helped us sort of look at ways that we could get funding to run these, because we wanted them to be free for people to access, and we just sort of put aside a day a week to sort of work through it. And I mean, we've learned so much along the way about what's easy to set up and what's tricky.
Yeah. We've learned, I mean, those 2 sets of meetings and trainings with the Growth Hub and Access to Finance, I think, were probably the founding point of it, because before that, I had a lot of clinical knowledge, but absolutely no business knowledge. And that really helped that grow. So I was thinking about what's practical, what's feasible, how do you do it? How do you do funding bids? How do you look at a financial forecast? There was just so much in it. So it was kind of almost going from this idea to a reality. And there was so much learning within that. Danny built our website, which was an incredible thing to have done. So I did a lot of the writing and Danny did a lot of the making, and then together it formed this beautiful thing. And we look at it and we're like, oh. So that's quite exciting. So that kind of happened. And then a lot of time was spent looking at the research and about what's needed, because if we were going to run anything, I think one of our founding principles is that it's evidence-based and evidence-informed. So we're not doing something because it sounds nice, but we're doing something because there's a very good reason as to why. And that's either about boosting mental well-being or encouraging exercise levels to go up in physical activity, because we know that has, both of those things have quite big predictors, particularly for exercise in terms of maintaining or supporting remission maintenance. So looking at kind of clinical outcomes for people who've had cancer, what are all the things that would support that recovery? And I guess part of that is also networking with other professionals. We spent a lot of time linking with other professional organisations about what they feel is important for this group. And getting Beth on board.
So one of the first things that we did, like Helen said, she had the sort of psychology experience. I've got sort of more the entrepreneurial experience. And then we thought, well, we really need somebody that knows about cancer. So I reached out to any medics that I knew from uni. A friend of a friend was and is a doctor training in oncology, and she also just happened to be in Cornwall that weekend, so I went out for dinner with her.
And also surfs.
Also really passionate about exercise in terms of, like you said, maintaining remission. So we went for dinner and she was like, yeah, that sounds great, I'd love to be involved. And then slowly we sort of lured her in, and now she's one of our directors. So that sort of solidifies that area for us.
And then it kind of all culminated very, very stupidly in a crowdfunder that ran up until the day of our first retreat, which is probably the worst thing we could have ever done, but we didn't realise at the time. Don't think I realised how much effort.
I think we just thought that for a crowdfunder, you just created it and then people gave you donations, which kind of is what happens, but actually they run a reward scheme. So we had to ask lots of people for things to donate that then they could buy, and you have to be really active on your social media. I mean, me and Helen are not big social media posters, but this was like, you want to be posting something every day, like you could win this creative wine, you could get this wetsuit, blah 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 blah. So by the time, like, it literally, I think it was the Friday it ended, and the Saturday we were running our first retreat. So we sort of like, I think we've learned a lot. Now we try and take some time off before we run a retreat, rather than coming into it a little bit frazzled.
But we kind of begged and borrowed, got pretty much everything offered for free for the first retreat. We ran two. So in September last year, we ran a day retreat, and then 2 weeks later we ran a weekend retreat, both for people recovering after cancer treatment. Both had 4 participants, so we started quite small, obviously trying to set it all up within COVID. We went from running in June to running in September. Actually, I think we were quite glad about the need for the knock-on and the impact of everything else. We just didn't have enough time to get everything ready. Had insanely positive feedback. It was exceptional. And kind of got to October, took a couple of weeks off just to regroup because it was so full on and intense, and came out the other side of it and went, okay, so that works. What about next year? So that's where we started. And at that point, we'd got £5,000 from the crowdfunder plus 5,000 from NatWest backed her business, who matched the crowdfunder. So we had 10,000 by the end of the year, and then at the start of this year we got another 10,000 from the National Lottery. And that's been our funds that's run us through this year. So that's where we got to.
So let's unpick it for sadly, a lot of people out there have experienced family members, even immediate family, friends of friends, etc., that have gone through the cancer journey. And talk us through somebody turning up to your event. They see it online. They think, oh, I could really do with a weekend away. And that they head down to the West Country. What happens?
So, I mean, one of my things that I always say about the retreats, one of my favourite things is watching the transformation of the people who come on the retreats. So to sort of set the scene, quite often they'll arrive, and I mean everybody's different, so some people are feeling more confident, but quite often people will turn up, they've never met any of these people before. Usually, occasionally we have people who have met through one of those online communities that you said, or wherever, that come down together, but generally speaking they've booked on something where they're going to have quite an intense experience with 7 strangers. So yeah, they come in perhaps quite anxious. We've got a lovely space in 12 Beach Road who have been amazing to us this year. They give us the upstairs of their restaurant, which overlooks Town Beach, so it's just got the most beautiful views.
Stunning.
And we have a coffee and we get pastries from this really great French patisserie called Chiquette in Newquay, and everyone just sort of mingles for a little bit and gets to know each other, and then we do a sort of formal introduction where everyone shares their stories and their experiences, and then that can be quite emotional, so quite often there's tears at that in the morning. So then to mix it up, we throw them in the sea, get them all in their wetsuits and go for a surf at town. And even then the transformation between that morning space and in the ocean, so you've seen everyone crying, and then half an hour later they've got these massive beams on their face, like just firing along on a wave, like even if they're just on their tummy, just like the stroke is so amazing. So yeah, the days or the weekend will sort of look like that morning chat, a surf, then we'll all have lunch together. Then we always have a recovery focus workshop, usually on the first day of the retreat. That's something more
skills based.
Skills based. So like we've had a dietitian,
physio,
psychology workshops,
clinical exercise specialist,
health
creation,
sort of where they can listen and ask questions and hopefully take away something that will help them in their day-to-day lives moving forward. Then we have like a nice relaxing yoga session to sort of round off the day, stretch out the achy muscles after surfing. Then we all have dinner together, and on the Sunday we pretty much do it all again. So we'll meet in the morning for another sort of chat over a coffee.
That's usually a slightly more open session, so it's a space where you can really bed down the kind of connection between people and ask the things of this group of people that, especially within the last couple of years when people have had treatment during COVID, there's been so much isolation, so little connection, that actually having a space with people who get it, where they don't have to watch their words, they don't have to watch what they say, they can talk without feeling like they're being a burden, I can't explain how important that is and how well used that session is on the Sunday morning. So being able to ask for advice or ask other people's opinions, or being able to share things that they can't share elsewhere, that session becomes really important. Then we dunk them in the ocean again because it's amazing. And that might be on a couple of the weekends, that's been an open water swim. So a bit of wild swimming around the coast, which is just lovely. Then lunch, and then another workshop, but then usually that's more of an immersive experiential workshop.
So we've had like a restorative sound class for that, which is really great.
And then we've also had a couple of sessions with Emily Jenkins from Move Dance Feel, which is an amazing CIC. If people want to check it out, it's a dance organisation that work with people impacted by cancer. And then we end with a really lovely little closing ceremony on a Sunday afternoon. And then it's a really emotional goodbye, because it feels like you've formed this family over the weekend. That's what it feels like for me. It feels like the insane level of connection between the group, between us and the group.
That blows my mind every time. Like I was saying, that transformation from seeing them come in, a bit nervous or anxious and not sure how the weekend's going to go, to I think every group, or almost every group, they've like formed a solid friendship that they're still in touch with now. Like they're always like, shall we have a WhatsApp group, Facebook group? How are we going to keep in touch?
Yeah.
And the energy is so much lighter.
And even as you say it, you're right, the way they hold themselves.
Yeah.
So when they come in on a Saturday morning, you often get them small, quiet, minimal, don't want to speak too much, don't want to say too much. And by the end, they'll just laughing and guffawing and don't care whether they've got their hair perfect or their makeup on, or I don't know, looking at a particular way. It's like all of those layers that we have that we almost perhaps feel like we need in day-to-day life. It's like, no, you can just be, just come, just be. We welcome everything, whether it's tears, whether it's laughter, whether it's sweating,
farts.
Whether it's farts. I mean, it's just in the yoga usually. It's just this beautifully welcoming space. It's really hard to put into words, but it feels like this massive transformation over a weekend. And that's it.
I think the last bit you said there around it's hard to put into words, I think that's almost the point, is that it's an experience. And I'm biased. I'm extremely biased because love surfing, love open water swimming, love Cornwall, have cancer experience in my family. I'm pretty much ready made to kind of experience what you guys offer, and I've seen it firsthand. So been to a few retreats now, and definitely that transformation in only the water parts, which is obviously the bits I came to, could not believe something that I probably took for granted because I've always done it. But also that bit that you mentioned around people that get it, I think is something that when you, as a family member, you've experienced cancer, it's a real tough one, because people can, say and support and do everything they feel they can do. But unless you have that reference point of actually experiencing it, it's something you can't explain. And there's an irony to that, because that's similar to surfing. You try and explain to somebody what the Stoke actually is, and they go, I don't know, but I do it and it makes me smile and it makes me happy. And I feel like it brings those worlds together of actually somebody in a space of going through cancer or having their family member experience cancer. They want a space where they can just decompress and people understand what they're going through. And obviously the nature of surfing and open water swimming brings a big grin to your face. So the two things marry each other up really well. So I was wondering if you could share, if you're happy to, just a couple of pieces of feedback from the actual participants, obviously anonymized, but I think when you actually, they put it into words because they do get it, because they've experienced it. So
we've thought about this, because I think that their feedback says so much more than anything that we say about it. So we ran a carers retreat in May. It was our first retreat this year, actually. So we added 2 new ones this year. We didn't just do the recovering after. We also added, we called it carers, but actually I think next year we'll perhaps just think of it as a family retreat or a partners retreat. So it's basically aimed at anyone who is supporting someone through their cancer journey, through their treatment, potentially afterwards, because it can have a significant impact for the people supporting as well. And one of the pieces of feedback we got from that one was, this has honestly been one of the most special weekends ever. To have some time and space to reconnect with myself and to examine the strange, difficult circumstances under which I currently live my life was incredible and valuable. I am moved and thankful for the kindness of the amazing people at SeaChange.
I know.
Especially when you know who's written it, you're just like, just offering a little nugget of time for themselves in a world that is just total chaos and so full on. You just think, I'm so glad they were able to come and just have that moment. And the feedback we get from them again and again actually just reiterates how that was.
And it's so special because you've met them and you've made that connection with them, and you're like, shit, they deserve this. Like, I think it makes it even more clear.
It's the rawest of human connections. Like being on that weekend in May, being a carer, if you like, could not believe how much connection you generated with somebody you'd never met over something that's horrible. There's no beating around it. It's a horrible experience, but actually there was such a human connection where everything else was just stripped away. And it was like, I get you, and I understand what you're going through. And that on its own, I think, is really, really powerful.
Yeah. One of the ones that from one of the people who came on the recovering after cancer retreats, just going back to what you were thinking about that connection, she said, I don't really know where to start. The weekend was exactly what I needed without realizing how much I needed it. I'd felt very alone with my worries and realized through talking to others that we all have had the same thoughts and how healing this can be. You can allow yourself to feel what you feel, and that's okay. There was so much joy and happiness, and also hope that life can be good again. I don't think I'd felt like that light for a long time. The surf, sea, dance, yoga was all incredible. At one point, surfing, Helen said, "You're trying to stand up too quickly." Once I slowed down, I caught a wave. I think that's a metaphor for what I've been trying to do. I need to slow down and catch the wave. And I mean, these are 2 of 40.
And we have a debrief at the end of each retreat where we sort of take ourselves to a beautiful green space and like just sort of digest what's happened and sort of bring it to a close so that we don't bring it into our sort of everyday lives. But part of that ceremony for us is reading through the testimonials and often trying to guess who wrote them, which makes a bit of a game. But like there's tears every retreat because we just can't. We're like, oh my god, like they got so much out of it, and it's quite mind blowing for us as well. I think
it really is. There was one retreat where the words kind of life giving and life changing were just used, and you can take that at a surface level and you go, well, that's really cool. And then you actually stop and you pause and you go, if this actually really was that, and it gave people something that they'd never experienced before, that they'd never felt like anyone else got it, that they'd never felt that there was hope or joy or that those were still available. I mean, it chokes me up even just talking about it, because you're just thinking, and yeah, I don't know, I take my hats off to them because I find it really hard. I would find it really, really hard. And I don't actually know whether I would go if that was me going, because I think a totally new setting. Some of these all the way to Cornwall, drove down and had a mini road trip all the way down to Cornwall. You put yourself, so many people felt out of their comfort zones. That was what they would say in their introduction, that this was beyond their comfort zone. They find this type of thing really anxiety provoking, being around new people. People came and overcame so many hurdles to get to us. That in themselves, I take my hat off to them even coming. And then when they get that out of it, you're just like, oh my word. It feels like such a privilege to be able to offer it. Yeah, it's really emotional. Yeah. There was one beautiful moment where we were in the water and one of the ladies just clocked and she was in tears. And I went over and I was like, are we on good tears or sad tears? And she was just like, I just didn't think I'd feel joy again. And I feel joy, and it's been such a difficult experience. She was like, I just didn't think I'd feel it. Absolutely helping fill the ocean because it was just, I don't know, there's something particularly around the surf, I think you're right, about getting people into the water. There's something that allows a playfulness, an escapism, an immersion. There's so much research about the blue mind and about being in or by the sea, but you just see it come to life. It's so powerful. Yeah,
it's and that's it's fascinating for me. So through the dance discussion, again, lost all perspective of time, but at some point last year I had a conversation with a dance parent who supports parents going through the dance journey. I put out their podcast, and about a week later they tagged me in something you guys had posted and said, you have to check this out, it's incredible. And I thought, as soon as I saw the lines, I was like, how the hell can you bottle that? And that was almost my first thought is, number one, how can you bottle up that sort of experience in a paragraph, a sentence, an interview? But you can't, and that's the point. But I think looking forwards, and again, statistics are horrible around the fact that 1 in 2 of us are probably going to experience it across our lifetime. This isn't an issue that's going away, but actually the way in which we approach dealing with it is getting much better than perhaps 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So my question to you looking forwards then is, what does the future look like for what you would aspire to do? Let's not talk practicalities, because I know how much work you both put into all of this, but from an aspirational point of view, what would you like, what you guys represent as an organization to be in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time?
don't know whether it would get there in 3 years' time, but my hope would be that this would be a standard offer to anyone who's had cancer or been impacted by cancer or is living with cancer. So this is a standard part of their care pathway.
And I would love, I would love for it to be available like outside of Newquay, so like across the UK, maybe even we could then like abroad retreats could be an option for people, because I just think that would be such an amazing experience. Longer ones, like week long. To be able to offer what we initially dreamt of would be really cool with the week long. I think that's probably a bit more feasible than it being available to absolutely every person who's experienced cancer. Maybe that's an aspirational one, but as an aspiration one. And I guess one of the things that's been really important is that it's been offered free of charge. So that feels like holding that feels really important too. And for it to produce a body of evidence that what we're doing is working and amazing, because I think we're really lucky that there is now some research being done into surf therapy, partly through the Wave Project and other organisations that are offering similar awesome things. But it's new, so like to be able to add to that, because I just think, like you said, you can't put it into words. I think if you've experienced it, you know how amazing, like not just from the retreat point of view, but what positive benefits you get from surfing, what positive benefits you get from yoga, from connecting with like-minded people, and just to have something, because we all know that, but having something that says, here's some proof that actually that it works. That would be cool too. And that's something we're working on. At the moment we've got a psychology intern, so we do pre and post questionnaires with all our participants, so a week before they come and a month after and then 6 months after. So we're already wanting to explore whether is what we're doing working, is it useful, and that looks at psychological well-being, it looks at cancer symptoms and side effects, so physical health, it looks at exercise rate, and it looks at service usage, so both NHS and private mental and physical health services. So we're trying to just get a little bit of a time stamp on, is this making any difference for people, alongside a qualitative analysis of the feedback that we get and the testimonials that we get, because I think at the end of every weekend it is profoundly obvious that it has been a success for everybody. So I think we can't underestimate that. If we can back it up with some change over time, that would be really cool. So understanding that, and if it isn't creating change over time, then exploring why it's not and what needs to change in order for it to be able to do so. So being able to keep that clinical momentum going feels really important.
So looking ahead, we've got a good audience that's, big range of ages all over the country, all over the world. If you could wave a magic wand and people can come out of the woodwork and help spread the word, do anything to support what you're doing, what would be your top 3 things right now that you would say to everyone listening?
You want to fundraise for us? Because that's one of the biggest hurdles, is getting funds. We want the projects to be free to access as much as possible. We can only do that with funds that we are given either by grants or by direct fundraising. So one of our participants has already fundraised for us, which is amazing. We work through donations. So if people are able to financially support us, that would be incredible.
I think time support as well. If anyone's got any skills that they can volunteer, particularly with, it's not so much the admin side of stuff, but like we're trying to set up a new booking system, for example, which, so that everything can be in one place. I suppose it's business consulting, maybe, or just anyone that's got a skill that they can lend to this that they think would be great and that they would like to offer. I think that would be awesome.
And then I guess the third part of it is if people would be interested in coming and helping us facilitate in any which way, please. Thank you very much. Because retreats are limited by us, by physical limits of emotionally, physically. It takes a fair amount to deliver. And we can't, or we won't spend every weekend a year doing it.
Because this is alongside our normal jobs as well.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe people don't know that
Yeah.
from the website, because it looks like a big professional business, but this is like a side.
Yeah, there's two of us. That helps.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of interns. So if we can deliver more, if we have people to deliver more. So if you are interested in helping group facilitation, if you've got maybe a background in mental health, or feel able to hold a group space with some really difficult conversations sometimes, with supervision and support that I would provide, then get in touch. Alongside that, you'd get to get in the water, you'd get to be a part of all the other joyous bits, you'd get to do the dance, you'd get to do the yoga or the sound bath. I mean, like the way we work is we really dip into, we look after ourselves as much as we do it. If you'd want to be, alternatively, I guess, if you want to be hands-on in the water, that would be perfect, because we love that. We have a beautiful team of water supporters, of which Kevin's part of, so thanks. Then yeah, we try and do one-to-one support in the water, just because of it making life way easier, and shares the stoke and the energy and the enthusiasm, and we make this beautiful squad when we're out in the water that's just like, I don't know, dream team. So if you'd be up for water sport, or if you'd be up for maybe volunteering or helping facilitate throughout the day, but maybe you don't want to lead stuff, but you want to be around to help support and scaffold and be a runner and get lunch orders in, that kind of thing, that would be really helpful. But yeah, we can't run without staff and volunteers. So if you're interested to get involved, please do get in touch via the website.
Well, we'll make sure we include everything, every link, every tag, everything in the show notes, and obviously when we put this out. But I've got a reflective question specifically for both of you now as people, not about the business. Looking back, everyone has a view of where their life's going to head, and I'm sure, I don't know if for you certainly, Helen, that you were looking at London thinking that's the end game, that's where I want to get to. Or if you could go all the way back to 9, 10, 11 years old, when the first thoughts of, well, what am I going to do after school? You know, what would you say, having now gone through this whole journey? And I'm sure that's a different question for both of you, but what does that look like? I'll start with Danny, putting you on the spot.
To be honest, am I allowed to swear?
You can swear. I just have to put a little tag at the bottom, but that's fine.
It's not so much what compared to what my 9-year-old self is, but like I went home to visit my parents recently and was just talking about one of the retreats, and me and my mum were both just sort of like, how the fuck did you end up doing this? Because it's so unrelated to anything that I've done professionally, but it's also so tied in with everything that I'm really passionate about on a non-professional level. And I just think I'm just so proud of what we've created as well. Like, I feel like, how have we done this? And how are we, like, how have so many people got such positive things to say? So yeah, I'm just like a little bit shell-shocked that I don't really know how I got here, but also really proud and really chuffed that we have.
I think I would say to my younger self that you don't have to be, I don't know how to put it into words. I think I always grew up with this idea that you had to have, you would have a relation, you'd go to university, you'd have a relationship, you'd get married, you'd buy a house, you'd have a job, you'd work in that same job all your life, it'd be a good job, and you'd do well at it, and that was it. And it was this kind of holding on to professionalism, perhaps, or
really linear.
Yeah, really, really linear. And I think I'd go back and just be like, go with it, whatever it is. You don't have to do that path. If you don't do that path, it doesn't matter. You'll still get to this amazing outcome. I think it took me until I was in my, till I was like 30, 31 before I realised I didn't have to live that path and that I could do something different. And that was when I took my sabbatical, and then I was suddenly, I think everybody else thought I'd gone slightly off the rails and lost the plot a bit. But for me, I was suddenly like, oh my word, I can step out of this path and I can I don't know, just be way more open to opportunities that I then think about becoming a surf instructor. Happened to meet the Wave Project guys, happened to meet Danny. Danny goes, that sounds really good, let's do it. We have a go at it, we see whether it works. It massively works. It's a bit overwhelming. Like, it just, I think I would just say don't set your expectations. Just try. If something interests you, just do it. Doesn't have to be
for any reason
or for any professionalism or looking a certain way, or because that's what's expected of you. That's bullshit.
There's an irony to all of that when you talk about the subject of cancer, because there is no set path with it. You know, I know people who have had it in their teenage years. I know people who have had a ridiculously unhealthy lifestyle, and then it's suddenly emerged in their 80s, and everything in between. So I think understanding that life doesn't follow a nice straight linear path. So number one, don't try and control it, and number two, when opportunities pop up, go with it. And I think it was, and I recount the story of first conversing with you guys and like, I'd love to do a podcast. And you were like, can we do it quick? Because we need some volunteers. And I'm like, what do you need volunteers for? And you were like, we need help in the water. I was like, I'll come down. But there would have been, I'd imagine many people out there on their life journeys, that perhaps very linear life journey, would go, no, like I won't deviate. And it's, you've got to live. And I think just chatting to people about this over the weekend just gone, and we were talking about the fact that life's not a rehearsal. Like, just get out there and do it. And I think the experiences I've had with what you've done and the story you've shared, and no doubt what you're going to accomplish over the coming years, is absolutely incredible, and it's so impactful, and it affects everyone in some capacity. I'm really happy that we've got a guest that's appeared.
Sorry, he's just woken up and come in. Come on. Good boy.
There we go. I've never interviewed a dog as part of the podcast, so
he's not very chatty. He's quite smelly. Well, I think he might just had a little trumpy.
I think that's his way of saying it's time for a walk, and I think that's I'm going to have to screenshot that, because I've never had mid or end of a podcast being ended by a dog interrupting us. So I think that's a beautiful way to put it all together. But Helen and Danny, thank you so much for your time. We're going to make sure we share this far and wide, and hopefully the coming 12 months and beyond that is going to be extremely exciting for you both.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for your support.
Yeah, your support, your time, your help,
and your championing of it. I think you don't recognise how much going down. I don't think you recognise how having cheerleaders alongside really makes a difference.
Yeah.
And you've been a massive cheerleader for us. I think if we hadn't got those people around us that go, keep going, you're doing well, look at this, you can try this. I think maybe we wouldn't have got to where we are. So thank you, because you're a big part of that.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. And don't forget, we've got a back catalogue of content that goes all the way back to January 2020, including fighter pilots, Olympic champions, TV presenters, and inspiring authors. We'd really appreciate it if you can give us a quick rate and review, however you're joining us today. And if you don't want to miss out on any future episodes, make sure you hit subscribe. Our community update drops once a month, and we've got some great guest content being added, so be sure to sign up for that. And finally, we're all about inspiring and supporting as many people as possible. So if you can share this episode with one person that you think would enjoy it, that would be really, really cool. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Road Monkey Podcast.